Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. Today's presentation, I would like to talk about the Islamic Sufi influence on the Golden Dawn and Geomancy. I hope you enjoy this, and I represent myself only. This presentation is my own interpretive and analytical work created for educational and nonprofit purposes. It reflects my perspective on historical transmission, esoteric traditions, and the intellectual relationship between Islamic, Eastern, and Western systems. I am not presenting spiritual instruction or dogma, but rather a critical reconstruction of intellectual history. I encourage viewers to approach this material with discernment and curiosity. Just take the teachings and apply them to your life. It's not encouraging you to join anyone or anything. I approach this subject from the position that what is often labeled as quote-unquote Western occultism is in large part a continuation, translation, and transformation of earlier Islamic and Eastern knowledge systems. My goal is not simply to critique, but to recenter the narrative, placing Islamic intellectual, spiritual, and metaphysical contributions back into their rightful position at the foundation of these traditions. I reject the idea that systems like the Golden Dawn emerged in isolation within Europe. That narrative collapses under even minimal historical scrutiny. What I see instead is a pattern. Knowledge flows east to west, is translated, abstracted, and then rebranded as European, often stripped of its original metaphysical depth. And I've covered this for many years, whether it's Aleister Crowley and his Sufi Islamic influence in North Africa and the Middle East. Same with the Knights Templars, studying under the Hashashin and the Sufi orders, rebranding that into Freemasonry. What we see with Rosicrucianism, Christian Rosencreutz went to the East. Same with Madame Blavatsky under Serapis Bey, who was actually Jamal el-Afghani, a Sufi Masonic master. So there is a recurring theme of all of the Western occultic esoteric system retracing its root back to the East, but the ones today don't want to give the East any credit. And that's where I come in with my videos, books, and lectures, and others out there like me. From the Abbasid Caliphate into later Ottoman intellectual networks, I observe a massive preservation and expansion of ancient sciences. Astrology, alchemy, mathematics, algebra comes from Arabic sources, and esoteric disciplines, the name of the stars in Arabic. Europe did not independently generate these systems at the same level during that period. Rather, it inherited them through translation movements in places like Al-Andalus and Sicily. And of course, it was the Muslim presence in Spain that brought the European Renaissance and brought them out of darkness into the light. When I examine Western grimoires, especially those in the Solomonic tradition, I see clear structural and conceptual parallels with earlier Arabic works, The Mad Arab, Abu al-Hazrad, and even H.P. Lovecraft, a lot of that coming from the Sufi teachings of the East, The Shams al-Ma'arif. This includes talismanic construction, planetary magic, letter mysticism, and spirit hierarchies, all of which were already deeply developed in Islamic esoteric sciences. In studying Ahmad al-Buni, I recognize a highly sophisticated system of metaphysical correspondences involving letters, numbers, and divine names. These systems did not disappear. They were absorbed, translated, and reconfigured into later Western magical frameworks, often without acknowledgement of their origin. I do not see geomancy as a simple system of dots and lines on paper. That version is a reduction, a shadow of something far more complex and superior. In its original form, what I understand as Ilm al-Ramal is a living system that requires embodiment, the earth, and an active relationship with the unseen. In my understanding, sand is not symbolic, it is functional. It creates a direct interface between the practitioner and the earth. When sourced from one's place of origin, it becomes even more potent acting as an anchor of identity, memory, and spiritual continuity. And we ourselves as human beings are dust to dust, right? And when we go to our places of origin, where exactly our vessel originates from, like a plant or a tree native to an area, our health gets better. When my father was alive during his battle with Parkinson's, and he's gone now, God rest his soul. But during those moments, I used to take him to my home country of Pakistan, and his health used to improve because his vessel, right, dust to dust, we're all dust at the end. And he originated from that part of the world where he was native from, and his health got better. So yeah, that's all relative with the aspect of the identity and memory. The act of marking the sand is not random in a trivial sense. It is a ritualized surrender to a deeper order. I see this as a collaboration between human intention and unseen intelligences, rather than a mechanical generation of symbols. What I consistently observe in Western adaptations is abstraction, removing the body, the earth, and the soul from the practice. This creates systems that are easier to replicate but significantly weaker in depth, coherence, and spiritual integrity. So basically, everything in the West is watered down. I understand geomancy not just as divination but as interaction, engaging with intelligences that exist beyond the visible spectrum. This includes forces described in Islamic cosmology, which are often flattened or misunderstood in Western reinterpretations. Even the concepts of the secret chiefs, right? Or the Great White Brotherhood or the Invisible Chiefs or Brotherhood. That comes from Rijal al-Ghaib, right? The secret chiefs in Islamic cosmology that dictate the destiny of the world and humanity. I've made a video and written a book on this subject as well, which predates the Golden Dawn and all of the other Western occult concepts of secret chiefs. In my approach, the question being asked is never just a question. There is always a deeper layer, a true motive, a hidden structure of intent. A real system must engage that depth. Otherwise, it becomes performative rather than transformative. Rootedness as essential. Without connection to land, lineage, and disciplined space, the practice loses coherence. A system without roots may still function symbolically, but it lacks the power that comes from continuity and grounding. I recognize the necessity of a fixed point, a place where the work is done consistently. This is not superstition, it is about building a stable interface between the worlds, something largely absent in modern portable occultism, especially in the West. When I analyze the Golden Dawn, I do not see an origin point. I see a synthesis, a structured reorganization of pre-existing materials. Much of that material traces back directly or indirectly to Arabic, Islamic, and Eastern intellectual traditions, whether it's Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, OTO, Talima, and all of that in between. I do not accept that framing of Kabbalah as purely European. Its development is inseparable from the intellectual environment of Baghdad. The influence of figures like Saadia Gaon and Islamic philosophers demonstrates a shared metaphysical ecosystem. Now, in Baghdad, right, where all of the Jews were living at that time, in the Islamic Golden Age, as long as they had paid their tax to the caliph and the government there, they were allowed to prosper and basically have like a Library of Alexandria type scenario where intellectual knowledge and heritage was being shared, right? And that is the beauty of what we're dealing with. So Islam allowed Judaism to survive and thrive under Islamic rule. It allows its minorities to thrive, while we see that under Jewish rule in modern times, it's not given the same respect. So we need to give Islam its due credit. So in that intellectual environment of Al-Andalus and Baghdad, right, that aspect of what we know as Kabbalah, many Sufi ideas and concepts were incorporated into that. And I believe, in my opinion, now they use Kabbalah in Western societies and esoteric and occult circles as a Trojan horse to basically program people, right, for malevolent reasons and not using it in its correct reasoning. So now, moving on, in the works of Al-Farabi, I see cosmological structures that later appear in both Kabbalistic and Western esoteric diagrams. This is not a coincidence, it is a transmission and adaptation across cultural boundaries. And I also recommend checking out the lecture on my YouTube page with Sheikh Wahid Azal. So go to the playlist section, and where it says Sheikh Wahid Noor FSO, click on the second part where we basically expound on the Islamic origins of Kabbalah. When I study Ibn Arabi, I encounter complex models of reality involving spheres, hierarchies, and symbolic structures. These models strongly parallel later systems that are often presented as independent European developments. As for tarot, I am open to the possibility that tarot as a symbolic system may have conceptual roots that extend beyond Europe. When viewed through this lens, it becomes a part of a broader continuum rather than an isolated invention. What I see repeatedly is a pattern here. Knowledge is taken, translated, simplified, watered down, and then detached from its origin. This process creates accessibility but also erasure, removing the cultural and spiritual context that gave the system its power. So same with Talima and OTO and the Crowley stuff. I covered that in the book and videos. Rosicrucianism, right? Same thing. And the concept of Freemasonry. And it's like the same song and dance over and over again, where stuff is taken from the East, but those people are never given their due credit and source. It's all Eurocentric. And that's where I come in to shatter that. My intention is to recenter these traditions within their proper historical and intellectual lineage. This is not about dismissal of Western systems. Great, do your thing. But it's about restoring continuity and acknowledging origin. So I don't have any problem, you do you, with whatever you like, whatever system pleases you, but give the credit to the original source and where the influences came from. When we understand these roots, the systems themselves change. They regain depth, context, and coherence. They also demand more from the practitioner: discipline, grounding, and awareness of lineage. Now, there was this scumbag when we were having a conversation on Facebook, and it was about Sufism and how most of these Western occult traditions has copied the East and Islam and Sufism. Then he comes in, right, talking about Neoplatonism and how that Sufism comes from the theurgy aspect of Neoplatonism. But Neoplatonism itself comes from the East, right? From the ancient Egyptians, Persians, from the ancient Indians, right? The ancient Vedic philosophy of Samkhya, of returning to the one, right, which predates Neoplatonism. And how even George G.M. James, a Prince Hall Freemason, wrote a book called Stolen Legacy on how Greek philosophy stolen Egyptian and Eastern philosophy. So again, we gotta remove that Eurocentric, basically monopoly and hold on the spiritual sciences. I conclude that what is often called Western occultism cannot be fully understood without recognizing its Islamic and Eastern foundations. Reframing this history is not optional, it is necessary for any serious engagement with these traditions. My analysis draws on historical transmission studies, works attributed to Ahmad al-Buni, Ibn Arabi, and the Islamic philosophers such as al-Farabi, alongside research into the Golden Dawn and Solomonic traditions. It also incorporates modern academic discussions on cross-cultural esotericism, knowledge transmission, and the reconstruction of intellectual history. Thank you for watching. If any questions or comments, please email me at salmansheikh911@gmail.com. And of course, all my work is under the copyright laws of fair use, nonprofit education, entertainment, and free speech purposes. Thank you. All rights reserved.